Hello everybody, this is Fernando for the latest Mafia and Gangsters video. Alright, let's go ahead and let's continue the wonderful book, Super Mafia, Organized Crime Threatens America by Jonathan Harris. This time we're starting a brand new chapter, chapter 4, and the title of it is Odds on the Mafia. So the theme of it is actually going to be associated with the world of the Mafia and bookmaking. This is that hidden world that a lot of people don't think of when it comes to the mafia, where they infiltrate their hands within various sports activities. So it could be gambling, it could be bets, both legal and illegal. It could also be influences, like when it comes to making sure that people do certain things their way when it comes to the games themselves. And there's been some notable examples of it in real life happening over the years. And in fact, I was just touching upon it in the last chapter, chapter 3. There was a little segment dedicated to it, to the world of mafia and bookkeeping. So in this case, or bookmaking. So now in this case, it's nice to see it as an individual chapter. So without further ado, let's go ahead and let's start part 1 here. I'm wondering if they're going to talk about Lefty Rosenthal, who was, of course, featured in the Casino movie as Sam Ace Rothstein, who, of course, introduced bookmaking there into the world of Las Vegas, and he was, of course, involved in the mafia. So let's see if they talk about him here. So here is part 1. The subtitle is The Number One Moneymaker. The great American pastime is neither baseball nor football, it is gambling. And in all of its many forms, gambling is an even larger source of income for the mafia than drugs. FBI Chief Webster explained this in a Senate hearing, noting that the mafia families are not all as fully into narcotics as they are into gambling. This was surprising because the narcotics trade is actually a more lucrative activity. Webster concluded that even though there are larger dollar revenues from gambling today, that is changing. More than 80 million Americans, or about 1/3 of the nation, gamble regularly. About a quarter of these people merely indulge in relatively harmless games of chance or play small bets with friends. The other 60 million put more serious money down, legally or illegally, at racetracks, with bookmakers, in casinos, or on the numbers, or some other form of lottery. Horse racing alone absorbs at least $4 billion a year in the legal betting at the tracks. The illegal bookies make much larger mistakes. A much larger take is obviously impossible to measure precisely. Estimates range between 7 billion and then 50 billion annually. Much of this loot eventually filters into mafia hands, for many major bookies can do business only by paying the mob for the privilege, and they pay heavily. In a move recently uncovered by Los Angeles investigators, Chicago mafioso were reaching all the way to Southern California to organize independent bookmakers there. Their demand 60% of their take. Their only concession, they would pay any losses. Some bookies, hoping that the mob connection might increase their business, signed up. Others have so far resisted, always a risky response to a mafia proposition. And then the next segment is called the sports potential. Until fairly recently, horse racing was the bookies' biggest market. Today, other sports, mainly the big four, football, baseball, basketball, and hockey, have far surpassed racing in amounts wagered. In a San Diego case, a major mafia bookmaking operation was found to be grossing more than $500,000 a week just on college and pro football games. This take was dwarfed in New York. 6 members of the Corallo crime family were arrested for operating a book that took in no less than $273 million a year. A single hockey playoff game had produced nearly $750,000 in bets for this operation. Even sums like these are not enough to quench the mob's greed. Inexorably, it goes after ever higher profits that are guaranteed by trying to rig sports results. Drugs offer one possible means, as we've already noted, but the ever-inventive mafia profit hunters are always on the prowl for new angles, new techniques. Law enforcement officials are deeply alarmed. Webster of the FBI told a Senate committee, In the last few years, we had a good look at some of the incursions into the sporting industry. I think we are going to find connection with gamblers. It is an obvious point of vulnerability, and we have seen signs that they take advantage of it. Horse racing has long been a target for mafia penetration. A remarkable example was the major race fixing operation that functioned in 5 states in the late 1970s. It was masterminded by an expert on racing wagers named Anthony Cuella. He had the backing of a tough character who headed a Boston gang with a terrifying reputation throughout the underworld. Cuella eventually became a government witness and testified in trials that ended in the conviction of 40 of his former partners. According to his story, he would get one jockey to bribe the other jockeys to keep their horses out of the 3 winning position. The bribes range from a few hundred to over $1,000, depending on the odds on each horse. The racketeers would then carefully set up their bets on the horses whose jockeys had not been bribed. They selected high-paying bet patterns, i.e. exactas, trifectas, quinellas, to ensure the maximum possible profits. Cuella and his associates worked their scam at a total of 39 tracks. Sometimes there was resistance. Several jockeys and horse trainers had to be severely beaten to bring them into line. Many of the bets were placed with mob-connected Las Vegas bookmakers who were in on the scam. The Vegas bookies would lay off their bets with independent bookies, i.e., they passed their bets along to these outsiders who had no organized crime connections. It was they who became the real victims. Even if they did find out that the races had been fixed, these bookies had to pay off. The Boston gang's reputation guaranteed that no one ever welched on their bets. A second trial involving the same gang, held in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, shed a revealing light on mafia power. This time, Cuella and his friends were working their scam at Pocono Downs, a track in northeastern Pennsylvania. They were abruptly warned that they were operating in territory controlled by a mafia family. If Cuella and his boys wanted to avoid problems, the local mob would have to be cut in on the profits. Cuella knew better than to argue. He cut an extra slice of the cake for the mafioso in the area. Next segment is the numbers racket. Ranking high among mafia revenue sources is the numbers racket. It currently takes in a cool $10 billion a year. It has been called the poor man's alternative to Las Vegas and Atlantic City. The stakes are low enough for the humblest would-be winner, and the odds are temptingly high. Each day's winning number is drawn from the figures reported in the newspapers for the total handle, i.e. the amount wagered at a local racetrack. Usually the number is formed from the last digits and the reported handle for the 3rd, 5th, and 7th races. Based on these figures, as they are on a legal, state-controlled, computerized, partly mutual betting system, they would seem immune to manipulation by the mob. Yet, there have been instances where the actual figures would have fallen on a heavily bet number and where they were somehow changed before they reached the newspapers. Such is the reach of the mafia. The numbers bettor can wager as little as 50 cents with a local shopkeeper, newsstand owner, or other friendly neighborhood operator. The bet is on any 3-digit number, played either straight or in any combination of the 3 digits. If the number is played straight, the odds against the winning are obviously 999 to 1. The payoff, however, is only 500 to 1. This means that a $1 hit on a straight number pays $499, minus the runner's commission, usually $50 or more. For the player, these seem like excellent odds. For the mafia, that gap between the mathematical odds and the payoff odds transforms millions of small bets into big money. Next segment is casinos, the big skim. In the nation's 2 casino capitals, Las Vegas and Atlantic City, 1983 was a record breaker. Vegas, with 90 casinos, raked in a tidy $1.8 billion. Atlantic City had only 9 casinos and 1/3 the gaming capacity in tables and slot machines. Nevertheless, it came very close with $1.7 billion. Gamblers lost nearly $160 million to the Atlantic casinos in a single month. Revenues were up 20% over the previous year. Some 25 million people were lured to the gaming tables. A 10th casino opened up in Atlantic City in 1984, and the New Jersey resort's revenues easily passed those of his 52-year-old Nevada rival. At least three more casinos were to be completed by 1987, but nobody running the Vegas joints was worried. Both towns were doing just fine, showing steady growth rates. The Mafia wasn't worried either. Its grip on Vegas was as tight as ever. In Atlantic City, things shaped up differently, but still favorably for the mob. Las Vegas was, after all, a mafia project from the start. Back in the 1930s, a former New York mobster living in California conceived the idea of creating a great center of gambling and vice out in the bleak and barren Nevada desert. This visionary's name was Benjamin Bugsy Siegel. He persuaded the mob big shots to finance his dream in the form of the Flamingo Hotel and Casino. Seduced by his lurid promises of huge profits to be made from wealthy Californians, the mob poured millions into the project. But in the first years, the remoteness of the Las Vegas location kept the crowds away. Siegel kept demanding more money to build up the resort. The top mobsters grew irritated, and so Siegel was executed in 1947 by three well-aimed shots from outside his home, through his living room window, into his head. Ironically, his golden dream began to come true within the next decade, eventually to develop into the profit-multiplying, neon-lit miracle of today. Las Vegas is a wide-open town in every sense. The casinos are supposedly regulated by agencies of the Nevada government. The actual regulation is very loose. Ward Morehouse III, writing in the Christian Science Monitor, summed up the situation. In Nevada, there has never really been a concerted legislative effort to clamp regulations on the casinos. Then that's it. Let's go ahead and let's end this part 1 of chapter 4 from the book Super Mafia, Organized Crime Threatens America. Once again, the title is Odds on the Mafia. So let's talk about that here. Wow, that was really surprising to find out. Remember, this book was made in 1984. Just how much money there is when it comes to gambling in the sports world. So you saw those figures earlier. Anything involving, like for example, horse racing, which used to be the big one for the casinos. How it was at least $4 billion a year, at least when it comes to legal betting. But illegal betting, the kind of stuff that the mafia is more in line with, estimates range from $7 billion to $50 billion. That dwarfs anything involving the world of casinos. And they would keep about 60% of their take, and they would not pay any of the losses. So the people that were running it had to pay the losses, essentially. And then it illustrated some other fascinating figures, how certain games, like when it comes to the world of let's say pro football games, there was no less than $273 million a year that was done by one family alone when it came to their world of sports. And then also one single hockey playoff game alone was $750,000. That's insane. That's insane numbers right there, all being tracked loosely, lots of cash going in and out. Of course, nothing really linked to the mafia, but it's all heading to them when it comes to those dollar figures. Horse racing, I remember here in Texas, used to be, or still is, kind of big. It's one of those areas that is entrenched here in Texas, and I still don't even know where horse racing is per se, but horse racing definitely makes sure that casinos stay out of Texas. Like, they don't like casinos to come down here, because that'll take away their business. So I'm wondering during that time period if horse racing in Texas, way back when in the 80s, was also involved in the world of the mafia. And then it went into the information about the numbers racket, how it's another figure of about $10 billion a year, how they're able to use certain mathematics and odds, or spreading of the odds, to make sure that they hit those specific 3-digit numbers, which is insane. Like, they're using people that work these calculations for them. And then finally, the last part talks about casinos and how they make a nice set of money. I was surprised, though, again, like in 1983, 90 casinos, $1.8 billion. That was just over like anything involving horse racing, legally at least. But illegally, it looks like horse racing was making a lot more. So that was fascinating to read how casinos were dwarfed. The revenues from them were dwarfed by the world of horse racing, but it still makes money. And so we get to see that the last part was talking about Benjamin Bugsy Siegel and his dream to be able to create the Flamingo Hotel. I was there. I've stayed there at the Flamingo as well. It's a really beautiful hotel. It's perfect for middle class like myself and others who are just there to stay in a hotel that's nice but not super nice, like fancy, and instead it's just right there in the middle of Las Vegas. And they have a monument, a little plaque dedicated to him there at the hotel too. It used to be there available for you to walk up, but now it's locked because it's in an area that's behind the location where weddings take place. And so it used to be there, but I imagine what was happening was a lot of the homeless there were using that place at night, and so now it's locked up. If it's open during the daytime, I think it still is during the daytime, and you can go see him. I used to go see him there at his monument because if you placed a dollar or anything else in the monument, he gives you good luck because his ghost is there. If you can believe that, his ghost is still there at the Flamingo Hotel, and in particular, he likes it when people give that dollar. And I kid you not, every time I dedicated a dollar there and I made that specific trick to go to specifically to his monument, I always won during that trip. So it worked. But now, unfortunately, it's locked up because, again, too many homeless were camping around that area at night. So I can't do it anymore. But if you have a chance to go see that monument, then you'll be there. And who knows, you might see Benjamin Bugsy Siegel's ghost as well roaming around. So interesting stuff. All right, everybody. Thanks again as always. Take care.